Okay, Golf WRX, TXG viewers, it's the 14, we're back.
Yeah.
Ian Fraser, Johnny Wunder. Interesting format week there in Louisiana.
Yeah. Almost feels like a little bit of a week off. I always think of the doubles event, and when you see guys team up, it's different. It's fun. The walkout music, and it's definitely a little bit more loose. Nice to see some European presence at the top of the leaderboard from a European standpoint. Not surprised, but that was good.
Yeah, there's some interesting teams. I mean, they had Graham McDowell, Stenson playing, Fleetwood and Sergio, which obviously Ryder Cup, potential squads, and then the eventual winners, which is a really interesting team, one that I would have never picked to play together, but very similar profiles. Jon Rahm, Ryan Palmer. You have some information on how that came together?
Yeah, well, the funny thing, neither would they.
Okay.
So it actually wasn't, they didn't know each other. So it was their caddies are good friends.
Okay.
Palmer normally played with Spieth originally.
Yes.
Last year he played with, I think it was Wesley Bryant, but he's injured. So both of them were without partners, and their caddies are really good buddies. So they were kind of almost trying to set up a little blind date.
Okay.
So they're kind of going, okay, I've got this guy. So clearly two guys who are extreme thoroughbreds when it comes to ball striking off the tee. I think you'd probably say Rahm and Palmer might be two out of your top 10 on the PGA Tour. Just thoroughbreds, long, interesting players. Both play the cut from the shut club face. They both kind of get it a little bit kind of closed at the top, and then really rotate through it, and like to see that fade. So. Two guys who are always going to give themselves birdie chances. Right,
and two very heavy balls. They both hit very, very heavy balls.
Very similar games. Even watching a little bit, I didn't catch too much of it over the weekend, but when I did catch it, I saw their TrackMan numbers, and they were the same. It was 176, 175, ball speeds, and they were very similar to each other.
Right. So we'll start with Rahm.
Right.
Because his bag's been well documented. Palmer's bag's a little more interesting.
Yeah.
But Rahm's through and through tailor-made. He starts off with an M5 driver. It's basically built to anti-left, so the weights are out towards the toe.
Yep.
And he's in an interesting shaft profile, and I want to talk about this. We're going to put all of his woods under one umbrella. So he's in the Alder Green.
Yeah, ATX.
ATX. I think he goes 75, 75, 85.
Right.
I think is how he maps between 1 and 5 wood. What about that shaft? Because people stay very loyal to that shaft. The guys that play it for a long time.
Well,
so what do you know about it?
It's just a shaft that has evolved kind of. Maybe you could say a bit like the Diamana series kind of whiteboard has evolved through the years.
Right.
It hasn't really changed too much in profile, but as material content has improved, and sort of the sort of carbon ratio to resin has improved, and all those sorts of things, you've seen guys kind of stay in those shafts. And Aldal Envy Green was a shaft that came out in the early 2000s. Ben Curtis used it to win the British Open.
Old school, yeah.
Old school. And it was a really, really popular shaft. Actually, it overtook UST Pro Force Gold as the #1 best-selling shaft of all time.
I remember that, yep.
So the micro-laminate technology that was in that Aldal Green basically meant they were able to pack and layer more carbon on top of that, so you had a slightly more pure product. So the ATX is just an evolution of that, and the green profile, as everyone's quite aware, is very tip stiff. It's designed to kind of almost flight it down a little bit for the stronger player.
And if you see Jon Rahm hit a golf ball and Palmer the same way, they hit a very hard, flat, heavy, mid-trajectory driver shot.
Absolutely.
These aren't guys that hit it straight up in the air. These are guys that drive everything.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. It's actually going way back. So, when I was sort of playing, it was EI 70 was True Temporary Ice. It was kind of like the shaft.
It was, back in the 975D days.
Yep, and then Proforce took that over.
Proforce took over that, and Grafaloy Pro Light was around at the same time. So those were the three sort of aftermarket shafts that went with that original 975D range.
And so talk to me a little bit about, so the EI 70, we're going to get off on a tangent here for a second. So EI70, Pro Force Gold.
Yeah.
Like, what would those compare to now? Like, what you know about shafts? Like, what would you compare those to now?
So EI70 specifically actually had some metal through the carbon. So I remember, one of the first shafts I used to work with early days of kind of doing a little bit of club building. So when you used to cut it, you could actually see a little bit of the metal through the graphite. So that one would be very much like, a Kurokage.
Okay.
If you look at that with the Tainai sort of ingrained or sort of impregnated into the shaft. Where are we at? So Pro Light again, something very light, very stiff, 3.5 degrees of torque. I mean, there's a lot of shafts in that range, so that probably covers quite a lot of kind of what's up there at that. UST Pro Force, I mean, we've spoken at that one before, how that was just a freak. It was a black shaft originally that wasn't doing well.
Right.
They painted it yellow and purple and it blew up. Everyone loved it after that. So again, just another tip stiff profile that was out there and big selling feature. That was the stability, but it was the pizzazz that came with it.
Right. I mean, the reason I asked that question is more or less just because, you have to kind of look back to see what we have now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and there's so many trends that were back there, the very popular shafts. Back in the day, one shaft dominated the whole tour, right? Now it's a mixture, right?
Yeah.
You get the Aldila and you get the Diamantas. So
such a range.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So then we're going to go back into Rahm's bag. Now we're going to get into the irons. He is 4-through pitching wedge, and I believe he's in the P750,
50s, yeah.
Which is your player's cavity back for TaylorMade.
Gorgeous iron. I'm a big fan of that one.
And he's also in a 6.5 Project X rifle, another guy that has been playing that shaft forever, kind of like CT Pan from last week. What I want to bring up about Jon Rahm is he's like you mentioned last week with CT Pan, he seems to be a guy that is looking for feels or release points in his throughout his whole bag.
Right.
I mean, do you kind of see that trend with the 6.5 rifles and the Aldila shafts? I mean, he's kind of like that guy, right?
I mean, when you look at someone's golf swing that is as unique as his equipment has to be equally as unique, really, because it has to cater to what he does. So, for someone like him, when your club face is in that position it's in, the one thing that he is terrified of is left. Right. So everything he has will be sort of built to not do that, and including a golf swing, a body rotation. He really uses the big muscles. He shallows really well and clears. All that sort of stuff. But he has a very unique action which requires a very unique setup. Right.
So do you see that as a fitter? It just further strengthens the idea that it's not one set fits all. So we're kind of raised in this big box industry where you just buy a set of clubs off the rack. What we're seeing in the show, little by little by little, is each set, although it might say TaylorMade, it is a completely, highly executed set for that one player and how he swings the golf club.
And that's the way it has to be for every single golfer. I mean, and if you guys aren't thinking about your own equipment like that, you're really missing out on something. If you're settling for something that's generic and that is literally just it will do, you're missing out on stuff that can really help your game and lower your scores. And getting with an equipment technician and someone who can really identify the traits of your game and then build your equipment around that is one of the secrets to really having a game that you can squeeze every bit of juice out of what you have.
Right, and it's also about creating good patterns too. I mean, if your equipment fits, you're not making any kind of concessions for the wrong equipment.
And you're not second guessing it as well. When it's been fitted and you sort of went through that process, a big part of it is you have full belief that you can take responsibility for the misses that are out there because your equipment's set up well for you. That's a big part of it as well with these guys.
So you can't throw your clubs in the lake anymore.
Absolutely, throw yourself.
So he's in an interesting wedge setup too. I believe he's 52, 56, 60 in the high toe. He goes all the way through the high toe.
Right.
What are your opinions on the high toe and that whole kind of it's kind of a cult. I finally stuck one in my bag.
Yeah, I use one as well.
Okay, so what are your did it take you a while to get used to that wedge?
No.
Okay.
I instantly fell in love with it. I kind of got it around the green and started hitting shots that I really either had never been able to hit or I could only hit when I used to practice a lot.
Right.
And it gave me so many more tools in my toolbox around the green. There was very few times I felt like I was short-sighted to the point where I couldn't get it up and down. So I remember actually playing a course around here in the Toronto area that was a little bit shorter, and the greens are very small, but you really get penalised if you miss short sides. So the rough is very thick round about the greens, and by the end of the round, the guys I was playing with were kind of laughing at some of these up and downs, because they were, this thing was just getting kind of up and down from everywhere.
Right.
And I kind of feel like that club is like that. If you can master it, if you can really get your short game dialed in with it, it's kind of like nothing else in the market.
I feel like with the wedges, especially with this high toe thing and some of these 64s that are coming out, like that is sort of the circumvent for not being able to really get 10 more yards anymore. Like you're starting to make up your strokes in different areas now, right? Like, the distance thing's gone. Now it's finding that wedge that's like, oh my God, this is just way better than.
It's a funny one, that, isn't it, when you talk about that, the distance element is gone now. And I say that to the younger generation who are coming in to get fitted for the first time, and I joke with them, I go, you're never going to hit it that much further when you're older.
No.
Our parents and the older generation, the kind of 50s to 70s right now, they're bridging the gap between where they hit it 20 years ago and where they hit it now. They probably have actually gained distance as they've got older. We will go the other way because the equipment is so close to max out that we will have to, we will regress in distance, and we will just have to try and kind of plug the holes.
Right, so you're going to get it through forgiveness and cleverness around the greens.
That's it.
Okay, so his 52, 56, 60, high toe. So the 52 wedge doesn't have grooves across the face like the 56 and 60 do. So these guys, just for the record, I've talked to a lot of TaylorMade people.
Have you seen one of those ones that don't have the groove? I haven't seen that one. Is it nice?
Yeah, it's optically, you have to get used to it for a second, because it's not like when you put a high toe down, you're used to seeing the grooves all the way up the face. But these guys like these wedges because they can hit them down. Right. All of them do. Like, they all have the same reason for getting into that wedge. Dustin, Rory, all of them. And what you're starting to see a trend on tour is, the days of having a wedge that's going to really control spin and stuff like that. These guys aren't really looking for that so much anymore. They all spin it. Now they're looking to control flight. Like, they all have a window they want to hit a wedge out of, and that's all they want to do. Yeah. So Rahm fits into that category. So
he's someone who, for as much of his as we know about his strength of his long game, the actual strength of his game is his wedge play.
Wedges.
When he came out first on tour, he was the most unbelievable wedge player.
Right.
Now, I haven't seen as much of that in the last year or so, certainly with his wedges, but I remember very specifically when he first came out. And it was the first time when I think he got to the final, the WGC match play.
Like 2 years ago.
Yeah, and he played DJ, I think it was, in the final. I remember seeing some wedge shots that week, and it was just obscene.
Right.
I mean, every time he had 100 yards, he would stick it into, 4 feet, 2 feet. It was stiff.
That's it's funny, like, you hear all those guys, all the Spanish guys in a bunker around the greens from 100 yards in, and they always reference Seve.
Yeah.
Constantly reference Seve. And one thing that he said that I thought was really interesting, and we'll get on to Palmer here in a second, was when they're hitting bunker shots, the way that they were taught, and this is for the folks at home, is they try to actually get it to spin forward. So it hits the green and rolls like a putt. There's a TaylorMade video about this right now. And they hit, Seve used to hit bunker shots with a square club face. They didn't open it up and cut across it like we're taught today.
Yep.
It's something to screw around with when you're at home, because a lot of these guys will reference back to Seve, but Seve had a very, what we call unorthodox way of hitting a bunker shot, back when he used to play. And he's probably the best bunker player of all time, arguably.
Yep.
So something to check out. There's a TaylorMade video on it with, I think it's Rahm, Rory, and Dustin in a bunker.
Right, okay.
And they talk about that.
I haven't seen that one. I've seen the one with Tiger and Jason Day in the bunker doing their thing, but I haven't seen that one. Interesting.
Yeah, you have Tiger and Day talking about hooking bunker shots, and then you have Rahm and Rory discussing to DJ about how to square the face up and actually get it to hit the green and roll forward a putt. That's what Seve used to do. As far as his putter is concerned, Jon Rahm's in a TaylorMade Spider Tour, the old red one.
Yep.
He's been in that putter forever.
Yeah, he's good with that thing. Really good.
According to Trotty, who you talked to as well, some of these guys are hard changes when it comes to getting into the Spider X. Some guys jump into it right away, but optically, they really like the red one.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what you've heard from Trotty and anything in regards to the putters.
Yeah, I mean those putters have been a huge success for TaylorMade. I mean, and we get people. It's definitely the most requested putter when people come in here for putter fits to our studio.
Right.
But it's a great putter. It sets up great. It frames the ball really well. Little kind of mini mallet. slightly higher MOI with the insert rolls it great, kind of gets that insert's designed to get the ball up and lift,
right.
So creates that sort of that angled groove effect where it creates a little extra launch, even more than, on top of what you deliver from a loft perspective. Then it gets the ball rolling a little bit. So it's a great putter, and these guys just, I think once they get something in their hands, they're so reluctant to change it once they like it. You see that with Jason Day, Rahm.
Even Dustin's having a tough time checking out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he always seems to go back to it. I mean, he tinkers, but he always ends up back in that one some way, somehow.
Yeah, you said something really interesting on the show before about how quickly some of these guys can switch out of a putter, go from a Newport style to a mallet, which to me is just like, I don't understand how those guys do it.
So bizarre, and it kind of almost, to me, reinforces that a lot of these guys are still not using the technology that we're using in this store.
Right.
I mean, realistically, some of our clients get more specific fittings when it comes to putters than these guys. Now, we're dealing with, they're the best players in the world, so they have such fine sort of, feels and some mechanics, motor patterns, that they kind of know what they're looking to feel, and they'll perform based on that. But, when we see our players in here and we see, okay, there's, 30 degrees of face rotation, the face is doing this or it's that, and we can manipulate that with the length of the blade.
Right.
We can manipulate it with the toe hang, with the style of putter, whether it's a mallet, whether it's a blade, the length of the putter, all those things we can add into the mix to change that delivery subtly to get that face square at the point of impact. That's what we want. So it really is interesting to see these guys go from one extreme to the other, and both do well with both.
Yeah, that's what trips me out about Dustin, for example. He'll win a tournament, and the next day on the green, you'll see him with Claude Harmon on the green with like a mallet or something. I'm just like, I don't know how he does that.
Yeah.
As far as the golf ball is concerned, Jon Rahm's in the TP5, the 19 TP5.
Mm-hmm.
He's not in the X. Obviously, a guy that doesn't need less spin. He's trying to create some spin for him.
Right.
Okay, so now let's get into a fun bag.
Yeah.
His partner, Ryan Palmer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm just going to go through top to bottom what he had in his bag, and then we'll get into some of the shafts, some of the things that we know about his bag. So he's in an old school M1 driver. Mm-hmm. He's got a Acura, which is literally named after him. It's called the RPG.
Yep.
It's an Acura shaft that he's had in the bag for 2 or 3 years. He's very close to the owner of Acura, Gavin Robertson. And that shaft is literally built anti-left. It's a black Acura shaft. It's a one-off prototype. And I just got off the phone with him this morning, and Ryan said that shaft, that club, he cannot hit it. He can't hook it.
Which is exactly what he wants.
Can't hook it.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, I can pull it, or I can hit it straight with a little fade. He's like, and I've never hit a draw with this driver. So, and I asked him a little bit about why that driver, has he messed with other. He's tried different heads. He was in an Epic Flash for a second. He tried the Honma driver, the TaylorMade driver, liked them all. But like we just talked about, he's not gaining much from the new stuff, and he hasn't been able to gain much over the last 4 or 5 years. So for him, it's trust.
Yeah.
He knows he can hit that one in the fairway.
Yeah. Well, he's an interesting one off the tee as well, because for most of his life on the PGA Tour, he hit a sling hook. Yeah. Until 3 years ago, he and his coach, Randy Smith, decided they wanted to go to a fade. So, they used to joke with Palmer that, a 3-yard draw was a fade. Right. So, so he would hit one out there, like tiny little draw, and the guys would joke, nice fade. And, that was his game, but now it's very different. So, he's, like we've seen, as a bit of an emerging pattern on tour. You saw DJ go the same route. Used to turn it right to left. Now he felt like it was a safer way to play the game was to cut it. Right. Someone like Rory as well. At times you see Rory when he's playing kind of when he's on, I still think he draws it. Right. But when he's maybe playing courses where he wants to just kind of hit a few more fairway finders, he'll go to the cut. Yeah. It's becoming a more common thing. A lot of those guys, if you talk to Claude Harmon, you talk to any of these teachers, you have to time a hook. Like you have to time a draw. Yeah. A fade. There's not a lot of timing involved. It's literally just a body rotation. That's the old saying, isn't it? You can talk to the fade, you can't talk to the hook. Yeah. So then it gets kind of funny into his. He's just old school. Like, his old bag is just a throwback. So he's in an M2 high lofted 3-wood. His specs go 45 and a quarter in a driver, 43 in the 3-wood, and then 42 in the 5-wood. He is in an Aldila NX. I can't even say it. It's 2KXV? Yes, the same one that Kisner was in. He has no clue why he's in that shaft. He said
it flies 270,
Yep.
and off the ground if I want to kill it. And he said something specifically about that particular head, which a lot of players will talk about, is it's really hot off the top of the face and really spinny in the bottom. So if I want to hit a little bleeder out there with some spin, I can, and if I want to tee it up and let it go, I can hit it 290.
Right.
So a lot of these guys that are hard, one of the reasons the 3-wood's hard to get out of a lot of the guys' bag is for that reason.
Yeah.
Some faces today are hot up and down.
Correct. Anything sort of with jailbreak or something like that, you know, we've seen some of the Callaway heads with jailbreak actually are quicker at the bottom of the head than they are even in the middle.
Which is, from an engineering standpoint, it's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah. So, you know, we see ball speeds go, even though the gear effect still does exactly what gear effect does. You know, it will tilt the head down, which will lower the launch and raise the spin, but it retains the ball speed, in some cases increases the ball speed.
That's, it's funny, the 3-wood thing to me is always, I was most curious about their 3-woods because it's so specific as to why. So now we go into the 5-wood, which is a total throwback. So he's in an R15 19-degree 5-wood with an old, you could probably name the shaft. It's the old, when UST Mamiya owned Acura, it's an old red shaft called an 80.
It's called the XE80.
XE80.
Yeah, so it was one of Acura's line. It was one of Acura's line, and it was a really interesting, unique profile. So Palmer really liked counterbalance shafts.
Yes, yes.
Loves the feel of counterbalance, and you know, in that one, it has a very, very heavy weave in the butt section, so very butt stiff, a lot softer in the tip section. So for him, he really likes that feel. You look at someone like Palmer with the way he swings it, you know, quite a long swing, you know, so for someone like that, you know they have great hands. It's kind of like in a lesser extent, but it's kind of like John Daly.
Yeah.
Like that long swing, but what a short game. You know, and the same with Palmer, like great short game, great hands, because he times it up so well. Like, you know, longer swing, face a bit shut, all that sort of stuff. But, you know, he likes the feel of that kind of really butt stiff shaft. So, and that's just one he's stuck with. Again, you know, Gav's, you know, mentioned to me he tries stuff, and he just keeps going back to that. You know, back to his driver shaft, the
That's
RPG.
counterbalance too, isn't it?
Yeah, so he played the original RPG. So RPG as in rocket launcher, right? So high launch, bomber shaft. So he played the original 372 RPG. Which was the one Gav first came out. I think it was 3 years ago at Colonial. He said he first.
It was like a blue and gray shaft, wasn't it?
The first one was red and gray.
Okay.
Right. So then basically, you know, Gav is obviously great friends with Palmer. I think they're as close as you know, a kind of rep and a player will ever get.
Right.
And Gav really wanted to make it his mission to get him into his shaft. He was playing an old UST shaft. He couldn't get him out it. You know, Palmer would always try it, but he couldn't get him out it. So he finally turned up with this prototype, this all black one, which was the 472. So the RPG, not counterbalanced, much more tip stiff. Same one that Woodland uses, exact same shaft. And you know, he finally kind of got that flight he was looking for. He was kind of hitting it out there, and it was kind of hitting a nice peak, but it was staying there. It was just kind of bulleting forward. It never kind of hit up and then fell out the sky. So, you know, Palmer's like, you know, put it in the bag, went and played a bunch of holes, and then stuck with it. So, kind of a bit of a bummer for Acura in the sense that this was a black prototype shaft. You know, to the sense where, you know, it once said Acura on it, and the paint's wore off it. So no one knows what it is.
It just looks like a metal rod now.
So this, you know, it is very unique cosmetics, that shaft. It's blue and grey, and, you know, when Woodland has it in the bag, you can clearly see what it is. But with Palmer, you can't see. And Gav's built him a bunch of backups trying to get him into the blue and silver one if he can get one that performs the same, and Palmer just keeps going back to that original one because he says it's just perfect for him.
Knowing Gavin, after all this time trying to get him into the right colored shaft, we'll probably send him a neon pink one. Something that everybody will see. Okay, so that's his, you know, those are his wood. So as you can see,
very unique.
Another guy on tour that's just got a really old, you know, wood makeup. So now we're going to go on the iron. So we're going to harken back to, this guy was an AP2 710s.
Yep, originals.
Until 6 months ago. Okay, so he was on my podcast, and I asked him, he's like, I couldn't duplicate this set. And Titleist made up, you know, some heads for him, and he had some extra sets, and he was just recycling through these sets. Eventually,
I would love to have asked him a question on those 710s, because I remember been out at the Scottish Open on the European Tour in 2010, and AP2s were out, and they had a big problem with AP2s at the time. The original set, the tungsten was too heavy in the bottom of the head, and a lot of the guys were just kind of puffing it up in the air. And they actually had what they were calling them skimmed heads. So they were basically using lighter sort of tungsten pockets, and sort of they would have to redistribute the weight. Some were even grinding the tungsten down and kind of relocating the weight. And so I'd love to have known whether he used one of the sort of Mark II sets, or whether he was in the original ones,
right?
Because he's such a unique setup. So I'd love to have asked him that.
Well,
we'll need to dig into that one.
We'll dig into that one. Maybe we can post it when the videos goes up to confirm that. But so he was in that set forever. And was having a lot of, and it was coming to the point, kind of like Fleetwood, was coming to the point where he was going to run out. He had to find something. Yeah. So he tried everything. Yeah. And what he's looking for is not necessarily something he's going to hit further, something he's going to hit better. He just wants the same. He wants something that's going to replicate that. So when he went to the Strixon, he's in the 585 in the 4-iron and the Z785 in 5-through pitching wedge. And he said, I might pick up 5 yards on a miss hit. Yeah. So he's like, I don't hit that. If I miss-hit it, I don't get that little flailer off to the right that lands 5 yards short. He's like, these actually will hit the green and still hit my number. For sure, and he was, they were unsure when he tested that, whether that was it the grooves? Was it new grooves versus older grooves? Or was it, what was sort of causing it? But yeah, he picked up 5 to 6 yards, half a club, and they were unsure. I mean, as much as he loved them, they were actually unsure whether they wanted it. Right. Because they had been so used to their yardage. When you play
and
he already hits it far, so he doesn't need it.
Hits it plenty, and Gav was saying they used to talk about having sort of 174 into a flag, and they always knew that's nice, comfortable 7-iron. But now he can get 8-iron there, right. and he doesn't know if he didn't know at first if he liked that, but now they use it as a bit of a weapon, so if he needs to juice one a little bit, he knows he can, and so much of that's efficiency of this strike. So with that Strixon, the unique thing obviously is the V-sole. Right. So that's what he loves so much about it, is the turf interaction, how that club gets in and out the turf so efficiently to retain as much sort of as speed into the golf ball as you can. And for me, Johnny, that's one thing, I call that forgiveness. The ability to retain ball speed, launch and spin obviously in that little trifecta that we all know creates flight, but the ability to retain and sort of keep ball speed consistent is forgiveness. That means toe and heel strikes. That means turf interaction. Whatever it may be, everything that goes into making the ball speed consistent, I consider forgiveness. So for me, in and out the turf is very important for that. Well, Strixon figured that out over the last 4 or 5 years. Yeah. Their soles, we just did an article in Golf WRX about the Strixon, I think it was a Z745, about that cult following behind that island. About that, and it's that's such an interesting story, because there's a lot of guys that just won't flip out of that iron, and a lot of it's because of the sole. Like they just did something with that sole, and it comes down to turf interaction. And Ryan said something about that. Ryan Palmer did, is he likes to be able to go in there and dig it out with an iron if he wants to pound down on it, but at the same time he wants to be able to not have to take a divot every single time if he's on a harder surface. He wants to feel like the feeling's not going to change, but I'm still not having to dig down there and take a big divot. He's like, these sort of do that, and I don't lose anything by picking it off the ground. So so he's in those irons. He's in a throughout his irons, so from 4-iron until his lob wedge, he's in the KBS Tour 130X, which is a stiff, heavy boardy shaft. Yeah, but it again is higher balance point. So the 130 is it probably feels a bit more like some other companies' 120s. Maybe feels a bit more like a maybe a modest 120 from that feel kind of perspective, because it is higher balance point. So again, just speaks to his sort of preferences on that and the way that he loads that that type of shaft. That's just what he likes to feel. Yeah, he's he talked a little bit for him, he's a tempo guy. So if you look at his golf swing, he doesn't have a very orthodox golf swing. I mean, he's shut at the top. He gets a little long at times with the driver. He's a very timed player, and the reason why he goes extra stiff all the way through into his lob wedge is because it's a timing thing. He knows how to time and hit certain shots. He goes, the moment you put me in a softer shaft, I'm having to change my golf swing to hit a certain shot, and I can't do it. So for me, I just need fixed points of reference. So that's how he chooses. That's how he balances out his set. So
Talked a little bit to Aaron Dill about his wedges. I believe he goes F grind, and then an M grind, I believe, in his lob wedge. He just switched into a higher bounce lob wedge, and he goes 50, 54, 60.
Yep.
And they're standard length, standard lie, doesn't do anything funny to the grinds. He was in a very low bounce lob wedge into a 60.04. He went to a 60.08 literally for the summertime because the perception would be that their ground gets harder in the summertime. These guys actually play on a little softer turf in the summertime because they're dumping more waters on the greens.
Right.
I mean, around the greens.
Sure.
It gets a little juicier around the greens. So it's not like you don't need low bounce at that point. You need bounce during the summer because the rough gets really high and they're not playing at the local munis like we are, where the ground's like this. So that's kind of what he's done to his wedges. Nothing super sexy there. Okay, and his putter, he's in an old school, another red putter. It's an Odyssey from 2 or 3 years ago. He used to be in like the that UST metal kind of
frequency filter
shaft. He got out of that. He wasn't making any putts. Now he's in I don't even remember the name of it. I apologize for this, but he's in it's like an O-Works.
Right.
Looks like a ping pong paddle face. It's a
micro
mallet.
hinge? Is it one of the micro hinge faces?
I don't believe so. We'll put the pictures up and you guys can see. But for him, he wasn't making any putts. He went with a lighter putter, something with a softer face, and all of a sudden the ball started rolling into the hole.
Well, that was something Gav said with Palmer. He said, the thing with him is it's all about the putting. It's all about two things: his interest level on that week, whether he's engaged, which is a lot of the time with these guys.
Dr. Freddie Couples, yeah.
Honestly, if they turn up and they're switched on, they're going to be, most of these guys are going to be a factor. And Palmer's probably one of he might be one of the top 5, definitely top 10 sort of ball striking machines on the PGA Tour. If his putting's on, he will contend. He'll make a ton of birdies. He'll make his share of eagles. So for him this week, it seemed like he holed a lot more putts. And sometimes that can be having a partner. You're playing for something a little more than yourself, in that sense. So when you really have to grind and kind of make a clutch putt, it's a little bit easier to do that when you're kind of got to do it for someone else.
Right.
Which is cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. We got to know him a little bit over the past 6 months. He was on my podcast, and he's one of the good ones. If you're going to root for somebody, you're going to watch guys like him, Charlie Howell. There's some really cool guys out there that will talk equipment with you until they're blue in the face, and he's one of them. And then he's in really quickly, he's in the 2013 Pro V1X. The only thing that he said, he was like, I could switch to the 19 Titleist Pro V1X. For him, it's as simple as he just knows what that ball does.
Right.
That's it.
No surprises.
There's no surprises. He's like, they've had other iterations. Some spun too much, some went too high. The 13 and the 19 are the ones that are apples to apples. Like at some point I'll switch into the 19, but I'm just not there yet. So that's the inside scoop. I mean, that's as inside as it gets. We got Ryan Palmer on the phone this morning, so.
It's good. I mean, this is a good one. I love bags like Palmer's bag because that's what this show is all about. And explaining to people who look at that and go, "Why is he in an M1?
Right.
Why is he in an R15 5-wood?" There's reasons that these guys do it, and it all goes back to performance.
Right.
It's just it allows them to do what they need it to do.
Right.
That's it.
That's it.
End of story.
So things we learned today: old clubs are still useful. Get fit, and pay attention to some of these guys like Ryan Palmer that are out there that they're a little bit homemade, but they find trust. They find trust wherever they can find it, and I think that's an important lesson for myself and everybody to kind of learn. So this is the 14 once again. Ian Fraser from TXG, Johnny Wunder, golfwrx.com, my friend.
Thank you, my man.
Have a good week.
Till next week.
Yep, we'll see you guys soon.
See you soon.